Now excited to be joined by two very, very special guests. It is Aaron Murray, Chris Doering, just a couple of record holders. Guys, it's great to have both of you. Aaron,
Hold on, real quick. Just a couple of guys that grew up Gator fans here. I want to make sure everybody remembers that Aaron Murray did grow up a Florida fan.
I don't know if I grew up necessarily a Florida fan. I just went to games because it was conveniently close to Tampa.
Because your uncle was a Florida fan, right?
My uncle was a Bull Gator. So, I'm not going to say no to free tickets to sit behind the Florida Gators when Tim Tebow's there to go watch them. Doesn't make me a Florida fan. Just going to throw it out there.
All right.
I did go to more Florida games than anyone else growing up. So maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit of a Florida fan. A little bit.
Tampa and Gainesville are not that close. They're not that close.
No, they're not that. They're about an hour and a half. It's not.
Yeah, 45, somewhere around there.
I ain't going to USF football games. So, if I'm going to go to a college football game, it's going to be the Florida.
Dang. I won't tell my guy Alex Golish that you said that, but nonetheless, yes, just a couple of childhood Florida fans today. Look, we're doing this early in the week, but it's great to be able to have both of you to be able to talk about this game. And I do find myself wondering of all the questions that we can ask about this one. Look, CD, you had great quarterback play, so I don't need to ask you this, but Aaron, how many more touchdown passes could you have thrown for if you had CD catching passes on the other end?
Just a few more, that's for sure. Give me the big guy. What was your specialty, CD? Were you a tough nose over the middle of the field? Were you going?
Yeah, look at me.
I don't know if you had the speed. I don't know if you had the speed.
I only had a couple long throws in my career, but it was red zone target down to that part of the field, third down guy over the middle. The prototypical coach on the field, heady guy.
You would have been my Michael Bennett if you remember Michael Bennett. You would have been my Michael. Just nice dig routes. Yeah. Some red zone, good frame, throw it up to him, make some inside fades, that kind of thing. Yep. But maybe a couple more, and maybe you still would have had the record if you and I were together.
Oh,
no doubt. I mean, it's tough to because I think both Aaron and I had tremendous teammates. I mean, playing on offense. Like I talk about my receiving core at Florida being better than the majority of the ones I was with in the NFL. It was me, Ike Hilliard, Riddell Anthony, Jacquez Green, Travis McGriff. I mean, it was a pretty star-studded group. And so I know Aaron had a bunch of targets that he was fortunate enough to have the chance to throw to as well. So, it's funny because I talked about this morning on the Monday morning show. Like, for me growing up, like Georgia was the most important game on the schedule. They beat us every year in every way in the 80s when I was a kid. And then the dominance that we had in the 90s, I think, made the Georgia game less important behind like Florida State and Tennessee. And right now, with Florida kind of struggling in that rivalry, I wonder how much like Georgia even cares about Florida as compared to Alabama or Tennessee or somebody else on the schedule.
I would say for me, I always view it as the most important game. I think partly because I'm from Florida, so there is something to that for me. Like it was always my main rivalry game, so I still think it's up there. And as you know, like going down to Jacksonville, the atmosphere, the uniqueness of it, I think fans enjoy. Even if Georgia's kind of dominating the rivalry now, enjoy that part of it of going to St. Simon's. If you got the college kids get the Friday off, so they're going down there early. So I think everything around it makes it really special, obviously. But right now, Georgia, Alabama is just on a different level, and I struggle with this, and I would love to get y'all's thoughts on this. As someone who played against Alabama once, obviously played at Georgia, I still struggle to say that's a rivalry game, because I think rivalry, I think the tradition, I think of obviously the neutral field versus Florida, I think the Georgia Tech game, I think Georgia Auburn and what those games have been like, and I know this is somewhat forming into this quote unquote new rivalry, but I don't know. I still don't consider Georgia-Alabama a rivalry game. I just consider it two elite teams that have been fortunate enough to face each other in some pretty big games for the past 6-7 years, but not to that rivalry stage yet.
Yeah, I think familiarity breeds contempt, right? And because Georgia and Alabama have played so frequently with so much on the line, it's become an important ball game. But I'd agree, I'm interested to see what happens. Does Texas become a rival of Georgia's now that they're in the league? Does Oklahoma maybe down the road? With the schedules being turned over as much as they are, who are the new rivals that kind of pop up in this conference? But I agree with Aaron, Connor. I mean, nothing better than going to Jacksonville. That game has just always meant so much to both fan bases. And in a day and age where college football is changing as rapidly as it is, holding on to that tradition. And I know Kirby likes to say that game needs to be moved home and home, but I hope it never does because it's just such a special environment over there in Jax.
Yeah, Aaron, what are your thoughts on that? Because I was going to ask you guys about that. We know 26, 27, Jacksonville, they're having the stadium renovation. So there's kind of a debate about where are they going to play these games? They're going to play in Tampa, they're going to play it in Atlanta. What are they going to do with it? CD, you've got the unique experience of actually playing this game in a home stadium. But like Aaron, if you found out that all of a sudden moving forward in this new SEC that they were going to have this be a true home and home, and this game wasn't going to be played in Jacksonville, what would be your thoughts on that?
I'd be disappointed. I think it's right there, obviously, with Texas and Oklahoma as one of the unique, exciting traditions in all of college football. And like I get Kirby wanting to use it as a weekend to have recruits on campus to get more guys to Athens. But to me, playing in that game in a neutral site was a huge selling point. Like that was like to know that I was either going to go to Florida or Georgia and be able to play in this game 3:30 at the time, CBS, prime time in a neutral site, 50-50, all that. Like I love that as a kid. Like I was like, hell yeah, like Texas A&M, Arkansas, like that does not need to be neutral site. That needs to go back to where on campus. I think they're going to go. I believe they're doing that as well going forward. But for Georgia, Florida in this game, I hope it never goes to Gainesville, Athens. If anything, if you want to change it up, maybe make it 1 year in Atlanta, the next year in Jacksonville. I don't know. But I loved it. Like as a player, there was nothing better than going down there, driving over the bridge, seeing all the tents, the red and black, the orange and blue. I always tell this story, like my first time getting under center and looking up and seeing that 50-50 split. And I'm obviously in the unique position of being able to see that as the quarterback compared to everyone else who's kind of focused on other things. I'm looking down the field. To see that divide right down the middle of the goalpost, there is nothing like that. I mean, Oklahoma, Texas is not like that. There is nothing like that in all of college football. So I think it would be unfortunate for the fans and for the players to miss out on that.
And Connor, you mentioned my experience. Like it was unique. Like as a college football fan growing up, always wanted to go to Sanford Stadium to play between the hedges, and it was awesome. It was really cool to have Georgia come to town. But it almost starts to feel like every other SEC game when you have that, and getting to be in that unique setting. Everything that Aaron just said mirrors the things that I think were so cool to me. And my first experience, my parents would never take me over to Jacksonville because it was always Florida disappointment one way or another. We had season tickets at home, but like my first experience going to Jacksonville, I had to sell programs just to get in the stadium, and it was such a like I was in awe of the SEC logo on the middle of the field and just being able to never have a moment where it's quiet in the stadium. And when I played in that it was broken up into quarters. Now they've kind of changed it, as Aaron talked about, the two touching points being in the end zone, which is different. But it was a lot more of the red and black, orange and blue mixing together back in the day. It's just such a cool tradition, and the fact that it has its own Hall of Fame. I mean, that speaks to how important the game is, and just such an honor, I'm sure, for Aaron as it is for me to be included in that Hall of Fame that celebrates so many great years of this rivalry.
I would have totally disagreed with that take of, oh, you need to keep the game in Jacksonville until I went to Jacksonville and saw this. And for me, it confirmed everything that I've always heard about this game, is that it's so unique. You have to experience the cocktail party. And it is kind of fun that it is part of one of the unique traditions of college football that we get to see this game. Even though it is in an NFL stadium, I think the atmosphere just screams college football. And I would challenge anyone who hasn't been to this, get to Jacksonville, witness it. This game is absolutely awesome. And even in a game like this year, where we're talking about two teams that are in very different places, this game still should deliver. And there's a lot of intrigue going into it. CD, I kind of want to get your take on Lagway, because I know you're all in with him. Like all things Lagway, it's hard to be out on him. I haven't heard anybody that's out on him, but the matchup that awaits, and having seen what this Georgia defense just did on the road to Texas in Austin, are you all in on Lagway being able to kind of withstand that and navigate the pressure that Georgia's going to bring?
Well, honestly, I was a Graham Mertz guy and thought Graham gave Florida's offense the best chance to win because of his experience, because of the ability to handle whatever looks you're going to get. And I understood that wanted to sprinkle in some DJ Lagway, but the fact of the matter is Graham Mertz is hurt now, and you got to go in the direction of developing the young freshman. And I think you saw it against Kentucky. He's going to have the big plays, and then he's going to have the poor decision and throw a bad interception, and just got to kind of live with it. The thing that comes back in my mind, Aaron, I think about when Dan Mullen rolled Anthony Richardson out there as a freshman, and it looked good for about the first 27 minutes of the game, and then it fell apart with a couple big-time turnovers there in the late second quarter phase of that game. I think DJ Lagway will be more judicious with the football. I think you have to use him in the run game. I thought Florida got away from that after some early success against Kentucky. But I do think it's going to be a tough task. I mean, Georgia is the gold standard in college football now. And, going into that game with a veteran quarterback's challenging, let alone a freshman. So, I don't believe in moral victories at the University of Florida, but I'm hoping that this could be a competitive game into the fourth quarter.
Aaron, true or false? You did the Kentucky-Florida game just so that you could get the live look at Lagway, and then kind of leading up to Georgia, you get like the production meetings and stuff like that.
Get it, obviously the next day I was back in Athens in Kirby's desk, office telling him everything that I saw. So yeah. No, I did not do that. I don't want to get fired from ESPN. But I'm as UCD, a big Graham Mertz fan. And what he did last year, the way he played this season. The difference is DJ does give a little bit more of the explosive ability to push the ball down the field. Like you could tell from the very first game, the first time he got out there to the start to that, whenever he played the third and sixth and ninth possession of the football games, there was just, whether it was luck based on just the play that was called and the defense being perfect for it, or just his willingness at times to just push the ball vertically down the field, there was a difference in that. And Graham is great with taking the completions, knowing where to go, moving the ball methodically down the field. But as we all know, it's not easy, especially against a defense like Georgia that they're going to face, to have a 10, 12, 15 play drive in order to score. You need to be able to take some shots. You have to be able to score from, between the 50 and 30-yard line. And I do think DJ gives you that better opportunity. Will he make some mistakes? Yes. You just hope that he makes enough explosive plays down the field. I do caution, though, and this is something the coaching staff told us, wanting to run him too much, because the difference between him running pre-Graham Mertz and post-Graham Mertz is the fact that there is not a third guy that you feel good about. So do you truly want to run DJ Lagway into the heart of that Georgia defense and get him hit? So if they're going to run him, same thing they did versus Kentucky, they're going to want to get him on the edges. They're going to want to pick their spots, whether it's certain third down situations, certain red zone situations. But you don't want to just say, hey, yes, we need him to run the football, but we also cannot have him coming out because there is no one behind him that could go out there and beat Georgia if he does go down.
Yeah, Aaron, I think it's a really difficult thing to juggle if you're Billy Napier, because you look at how you're going to beat this Georgia team. You're not going to have these methodical drives. The Graham Mertz drives that you would have expected if he were the starter, I don't know that that's the game plan. You need to hit on these chunk plays, just like Kyle Trask did a few years ago in this game. I think he had like 5 passes of 30 yards in the first half. And if you're Lagway, you'd like to be able to dial up that deep game, but you're extremely young playing in this game. You've been in that spot where you've been a young quarterback. You talk about seeing this field, this atmosphere for the first time at that age. How would you handle this if you were developing a passing game plan for what Lagway needs to do to have success against Georgia?
I do. I think you take some shots early. And I know Georgia played really well against Texas and Quinn, who's a very veteran quarterback and really good receivers. But I mean, if you look at this Florida offense as a whole, and I'd love obviously CD's opinion on this, they have really good receivers and they got playmakers. They got guys with speed. I mean, Eugene Wilson and Badger and et cetera. They got guys that can take the top off. And Georgia's defense had a really good game against Texas. Front seven looked the best it's looked all season. I thought the secondary played the best it's looked all season, but that's still one game. I want to see, can Georgia do that back-to-back weeks? Can Georgia's defense do that was that the confidence builder that Georgia now can take and move forward? Obviously, Dog fans are hoping it is, but we've seen instances this season where that defense hasn't been able to get to the quarterback, where the youth of the secondary has cost them explosive plays down the field. So I want to see Georgia do it back-to-back weeks, and if I'm Florida, I'm going to say, hey, listen, this is the best Florida offense line that we've had in 3 years. They're protecting well. We have speed on the outside. We're the underdogs. Let's just take some shot. And we have a quarterback that is deadly accurate with the deep ball. So to me, I don't want to hold back and just say, hey, go out there, read the defense, be methodical, try to hit some easy throws. I think you weave that in there. But I would like to see some early shots from Florida. Test that secondary for Georgia and see if you can win some one-on-ones, which I think they believe they can.
Yeah, I think that was what the surprising part of the first half of the season was how many explosive passing plays Georgia's secondary was giving up. Some
Mm-hmm.
of it was about not getting the pressure that we typically see from the Georgia front seven, and some of it had to do with guys not playing the ball in the air very well back there. So I do think there's some opportunities, and let's be honest, I mean, styles make fights, and matchups are important. And I do think, to Aaron's point, Florida's receivers are really good this year. You go out and get DK from Wisconsin. You get Badger from Arizona State. Trey Wilson back for his second season. There's a lot of explosiveness there. The tight ends have been productive. And to Aaron's point, the offensive line, all of a sudden, they were mashing Kentucky's defensive front. Like, that was surprising to me. Jaden Baugh gives you some hope as a freshman running back that, Montreal Johnson goes out and Jaden looks like he brings another type of run with the cutting ability and how hard he finishes runs. So I think there's some things that Florida has some hope about, but I really do think it comes down to hitting the explosive plays because, like you guys said, I mean, just putting together an 8, 9, 10 play drive against the Georgia defense is not all that likely.
Well, I'm going to one more point on this offense too. You've gone the past 2 weeks against two very talented defenses. You were in Knoxville against Tennessee and moved the ball well. Couldn't score in the red zone, but moved the ball really well. And then you had your freshman quarterback throw an incredible pass to put that game in overtime. So a lot of confidence should be built from that game of like, we have a good offense. Then Kentucky is no slouch on defense either. Like CD said, that's a very talented front seven. They're big, they're physical up front. Maybe you have some questions in the back end, but overall, like you performed, I would say at a high level, back-to-back games against two quality defenses. One of them, probably one of the top 3 or 4 defenses in the SEC on the road in Knoxville. So like you should have confidence that you can move the ball against Georgia on a neutral site as long as DJ takes care of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to think Florida's passing game might actually feel better about where it's at compared to Georgia's passing game, which I would not have expected to say at this point of the season. CD, let's get you on the other side of this as well. How would you get Georgia's passing game going? Because I know I watch you and Ben Watson all the time on SEC Final talk about this, and Ben is still Georgia's number 1 team in the SEC and stuff like that. But the lingering concern, even after the Texas game, is, man, what's it going to take to get this group going? Because it has not felt like it's been in sync all season.
I do think they're starting to figure it out a little bit, though. They're running the ball better. You're seeing the offensive line get healthier and protect a little bit better. You're seeing Arian Smith kind of develop, Dylan Bell, those guys becoming, more the prime targets for Carson Beck. And maybe Aaron can explain this better than I can, having played the position, but Carson just hasn't looked comfortable for a lot of the season for whatever reason. And maybe it's the lack of trust for some of the receivers or the lack of trust in the offensive line, but they just have not developed a lot of rhythm. And offensive football is about creating rhythm. It's about staying on pace and staying ahead of the chains and not being in third and long situations. So the fact that they hadn't run the ball very well on first and second downs, I think probably contributed to that too. But I do think, Aaron, it feels to me like they're starting to figure it out. Maybe that has to do with them getting healthy and some guys getting some more experience. But I felt better about this offense now than I did probably a couple weeks ago.
Well, I feel better about the run game. There's no doubt about it. This is the uniqueness of college football nowadays. Of a year ago, Etienne's wearing the Florida uniform, and then heading into this game, he'll be wearing the red and black. And he's really come on. I think I do agree. The offensive line's gotten healthier. I think Etienne's the most explosive player on the football team, or at least on the offensive side of the football. And they're starting to get a rhythm there. And that's obviously what you want to do in SEC ball is if you can establish a line of scrimmage, run the football, knowing Bobo, from there, do some play action passes and take some shots. But overall, there's just a lack of trust. There is at times a ton of drops, from Arian Smith. Then Dylan Bell had some drops last game. Yeah. The tight ends have had some drops. So no one has played consistent. Like this is not just a Carson Beck has not looked good this year. This has been, hey, it's hard to play quarterback when your offense line's changing every week, when the running back room has been inconsistent, when the receivers have been inconsistent. Like look at the NFL right now. Brock Bowers is dominating. Ladd McConkey is dominating. You lost those two guys, and no one has been able to fill the shoes. Like you were hoping Dom Lovett, who I had the spring game, obviously we've seen him at Missouri, was hoping that he would be that superstar. And he's been good, not elite. Arian has made plays, but then he's dropped a couple. So like I said, like who is that guy that's going to step up and say, hey, I'm the guy in the room? And you just have not seen anyone really truly do that yet. So can they get going? Did they use the bye week to gain some confidence? I like Lawson Lucky. I think he's the most productive tight end in the group. But also, too, from a receiver standpoint, two guys that were starters this year are no longer on the team. Like Colby Young was playing well. Colby Young was a red zone threat. He's off the team. Rara was projected to be a starter. He's not on the team. So it's just been I would say somewhat of a nightmare from moving parts to inconsistency for Carson that, maybe I think they just really need that bye week to hopefully figure out what they can do in the pass game.
Aaron, you bring up BTN. I was going to ask you about him because that dynamic is very unique to be able to cross enemy lines and play in this game, and knowing that there are going to be a lot of people that would like to see him fail in this game. I mean, let's just call it what it is. You've been in that spot, albeit with different circumstances, as a Florida boy playing in this game. Some would say a Florida fan growing up, but you were in this game knowing that you were going to hear about it from people back home all week leading up to it. And obviously it's different for Etienne growing up in Louisiana, but kind of still some of that angst and some of that, like, hey, you have truly become an enemy on the other side. What was that dynamic like? Do you remember an experience that kind of like made you realize, oh boy, like I'm truly on the Georgia side now?
Well, I mean, a couple. Obviously, my high school, half my high school went to Florida, half my high school went to Florida State. So like leading up to the game, I'd get a bunch of text messages from my Florida State buddies being like, kick their butt. Florida buddies be like, I hope you suck tomorrow. I still love you. My favorite restaurant growing up, I'm not going to name names here, but obviously as soon as I committed to Georgia, I stopped getting the free chicken parm before games on Friday night. So, and I mean, for me, it was special to go 3-1 so my parents can proudly go back to Tampa wearing their Georgia gear and not have to hear the crap from Florida fans. So that was always nice. But I don't know how much I'm not saying we're numb to it, but this is college football nowadays. So will he get walking out of the tunnel for pregame warmups, Florida fans talking crap and booing him and saying, bad things? Probably, yeah. But like he would get that regardless of what happened. That's just the nature of just fans being fans. But this is a business nowadays. This is NFL. This is a mini NFL. Players are used to just new teammates, guys moving around, guys coming from rivals to their team. So I don't think like anyone on Florida is going to be trying to take a dirty hit on him. I don't think that obviously Georgia players are excited the moment he stepped foot in the locker room. I don't think you're going to see anything, like I said, mostly the dirty thing. And CD, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's any sort of animosity for Florida players to say, hey, screw Trevor. Let's go out there and try to take his knees out.
I think Aaron makes a good point because from the fan perspective or us as old guys, like we want somebody to be, wanting to take his head off. But Florida's already played a bunch of their teammates that were at Texas A&M early in the season, and you couldn't even goad any of those players into saying anything bad about them. So I don't think anything's going to come of this one. In fact, I talked to a bunch of the players that are still friends with Etienne and text with him, and like it bothers me almost that they're not mad at him for leaving him. But that, like to Aaron's point, it is what it is, and I think they look at it through a much more business-minded perspective than probably we did as players that were intent on staying from the time we were freshmen to the time we left as graduates.
Yeah, I think the Princely Amon Mielen reunion with Florida will be a little bit different, a little bit of a different tenor after some of the comments he had after arriving at Ole Miss. Guys, let's get out of here with some X factors and predictions. I think those Florida offensive tackles, we were talking about them before, the protection's been better. Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, the San Diego transfer at right tackle, and then Austin Barber, third-year starter. I think those guys are the X factor. Jacksonville native, by the way. I think a DJ is going to get timed. Like those guys have to be really good, and if Florida's going to do what it wants downfield, that obviously they have to be able to check that box. But CD, let's start with you here. Who's your X factor in this matchup?
We talked about the offensive line for Georgia being better. I still don't think they're what typically we expect from Georgia offensive line. So I think the Florida defensive line has been the most surprising thing to me. The offensive line has been much better running the football behind those guys. But like the way they penetrated against a Tennessee offensive line that I thought was pretty good prior to that game, the way that they penetrated against Kentucky a couple weeks ago, I think that group is going to be the most important because we talked about the uncomfortability of Carson Beck to this point in time. If you can force him into some turnovers, which he has made this year at a surprising rate, I think that gives Florida a chance to stay in the ballgame.
Yeah, I do think it's that matchup, at least for Georgia to be able to run the football. I mean, Florida still has been very inconsistent against the run this year. I think they're ranked in the bottom part of the SEC when it comes to rush defense. So can you build on the momentum with Etienne and how well he's been to take some of the pressure off Carson? And then flip it over the other side. I do think DJ is a superstar in the making. I think DJ is going to be one of the premier quarterbacks, not only in the SEC, but in all of college football. He's, met with him last week, sat down with him, very mature for his age. He's played a decent amount of football already this season. So like the plan set forth is now going to pay dividends because he has been able to get into the game, play against Tennessee on the road, play against Kentucky a week ago. So he's not a veteran. He hasn't seen a lot of football still, but enough to where you should feel confident that nothing is going to completely shock him in this game. So how does he handle the moment? Because it's different. Like we talked about at the beginning, and I played as a freshman, not a true freshman, but a redshirt freshman. Getting in that stadium, knowing how big this rivalry is, I'm sure he's never been there before, being from the state of Texas. Getting in there for your first snap and looking around and seeing just the uniqueness of that atmosphere can throw you off a little bit. So can he just get his wits from him early, be the mature kid that Florida fans are hoping he can be, and just not make too many mistakes?
I'm going Georgia by 3 touchdowns, which sounds really lopsided, but it's actually just because I predicted Texas to beat Georgia by 3 touchdowns. So it's a little bit of like a Georgia fans, like I messed up. I'm sorry. So I'll defer to you guys on this. CD, do you have a prediction for this one?
Yeah, I'd love to sit here and tell you that I expect Florida to win. My hope is that it's a competitive ball game. And people have asked me about Billy Napier's future. I don't know that there's a number of wins that he has to have to retain his job. I think it's about the aesthetics, about the competitiveness the rest of the way, about the cleanliness of execution and not the self-inflicted penalties and disorganization on the sideline. Georgia's the gold standard. And so Florida needs to show that they've narrowed the gap in talent discrepancy. Mm-hmm. And if they can make this a competitive ball game deep into the second half, again, we don't deal in moral victories, but I think we're at a point right now where that's kind of the reality. So I think Florida probably hangs in for a while. And I think at the end of the day, the experience factor and the youth of Florida is the difference. And Georgia goes on to win by 13.
Yeah, I hope Billy keeps his job. I really like Billy as a coach. I mean, you look at their 3 losses this year. They're 3 teams that are projected in the playoffs, top 10 football team. So, and probably should have won that game there in Knoxville. So I like him as a coach. I hate obviously what he's going through with the schedule that they have this season. But I agree with Georgia's just more talented on both sides of the football. This would have to be a game where Carson makes mistakes like he did against Alabama, like he did against obviously Texas, for Florida to really truly have an opportunity to win this one. But I think it's a 31-17 game. I still do not trust Georgia's offense right now to be able to play clean, to create explosive plays. And I think Florida's defense is good enough on all 3 levels to kind of create some issues. So I'm with CD. I think it's a good 3 quarter. I think Georgia maybe pulls away a little bit in the 4th quarter, wins by 2 scores.
Guys, this has been fun. Hopefully we can do this every year. Let's call it Florida Georgia Line. That name's not being taken right now. That's not
no, never heard that before.
Georgia, Florida.
Georgia, Florida. My bad. Well, I always just try and just cater it to whatever audience I'm speaking to. Florida, Georgia versus Georgia, Florida. Although, if we're being honest, we want to get into AP style. Alphabetically
It's
speaking.
alphabetical. Exactly. I've been saying that forever.
No. It's whoever wins the previous year.
Georgia, Florida line doesn't sell out a stadium. Florida, Georgia line sells out a stadium.
We don't know that.
Fair point. Guys, appreciate it.
Appreciate y'all.
Thanks, brother.